Well, good morning to everyone that has just joined us, and hello if you are watching the replay. Welcome to another one of our online webinars. This time it's all about, is bamboo the new knotweed? I'm your host, Andy Ferguson. Today, joining me, I am pleased to welcome back Jim Glaister, Regional Manager of the Knotweed Company. We are about to start the main presentation. Just for those who have just joined us, if over the course of the webinar you want to pose a question, first place I would point you to is to the chat facility that will, on our desktop, will either run down the left or the right hand side, or the laptop that is. All you need to do is hit the comments bit, stick in what you want to say, and wham bam, thank you ma'am, we will get your question. If it's on a mobile device, just pull up from the screen there and you'll see the little comments button there. Alternatively, you can email me at andy@property-care.org. That's andy@property-care.org. Or if you are socially savvy, simply just use the native messaging tools on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, or X, formerly known as Twitter. Well, Jim, I can see it's 1 minute past 9. Bamboo. For me, out of all the invasive weeds, bamboo is probably the one that fascinates me the most. Do you know, whenever I kind of see pictures of it, I can almost feel glued to the screen. It's when I see the underground rooting system, and it's almost like fingers growing, do you know, out through the ground, do you know, yellowy kind of green fingers. I feel transfixed whenever I see the growth. But when it comes to the built environment and our buildings, is bamboo really as bad as knotweed? And if so, what should we be doing about it as professionals to get better informed and prepared to tackle the problem? Some questions there that particularly interesting, certainly for me, Jim. And I suppose over to yourself, good sir.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll start off with what's on the screen right now. A phrase that has become more and more prevalent over the last 2 or 3 years is bamboo is the new knotweed. So what I want to do in this webinar is I want to examine that, look at the similarities and the differences between Japanese knotweed and bamboo, and see whether bamboo is actually as bad as knotweed or not as bad, or is it worse? So I'm going to start off with a few basics. First of all, it's quite common to hear people just talk about bamboo as if there is only one bamboo. There are, depending on which source you look at, there's over 1,000 or over 1,500 different species of bamboo out there in the world, and there are new cultivars being created all the time. So it's anybody's guess. Nobody seems to know exactly how many there are out there. One thing that we can say about them is that none of them are listed on Schedule 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 as amended, which means that there is no legal restriction on disposal, on sales. There's no responsibility under the Act for tackling bamboo if it escapes into the wild, which it does. And so currently the only legal defense against bamboo encroachment is using nuisance legislation in the civil courts. Now, it's been claimed that bamboo is the fastest growing woody plant in the world, and having seen what I've seen, I can believe that statement. They've become particularly popular as a garden ornamental and a screening plant over the past 20 to 30 years, becoming increasingly popular in gardens. There are, as well as multiple species of bamboo, they can roughly be divided into 2 types, and that is clumpers and runners, which is sort of like the colloquial term for how their rhizomes grow. So you can see the 2 illustrations down the bottom there. The one on the left is clumping bamboo, where you can see what happens is the rhizomes are very short, very thick, and as soon as they emerge, they immediately come up to the surface, and then they create a new culm, which is a posh word for stem. Whereas the running bamboo as the name sort of suggests, will create long rhizomes, and then you will have sort of shoots coming up from any point along those rhizomes, and the rhizomes also branch off. So bamboos are a non-native species, and some of them, particularly the running type, can prove highly invasive. So it's worth pointing out that the clumping bamboos are a lot less problematic, that over time they will spread, they will take up quite a large area, but then they don't run off straight across a garden or underneath a fence and sort of establish a bamboo grove in your next door neighbor's garden, whereas the running ones do things like that. So just sort of like on a general note, I've just got this quote here from the Law Commission from 2014, which said in Europe around 10 new non-native species establish themselves every year. There are approximately 1,900 non-native species established in the wild in Great Britain, of which 109 are plants, and they are considered to have a negative ecological or human impact. So that was 109 plants in 2014. So anybody's guess how many there are now. So problematic non-native plant species, typically they're introduced into gardens and then they escape into the wild, which then results in an ecological imbalance, reduction in biodiversity, a whole number of other issues. And these species require active management to control, limit, reduce, or remove. And there are a number of non-native plant species that can have a detrimental effect on structures, amenity use, or both. And those capable of seed production or regeneration from rhizome fragments have been spread further afield through incorrect disposal or poor management, or both. So it's not uncommon to find a non-native species at the heart of a neighbour dispute and legal action. And of course, the most well-known plant to impact in this way is Japanese knotweed, which then brings us to the question, is bamboo as bad as knotweed? Well, Japanese knotweed these days, it has a really fearsome reputation. It's had over 2 decades of sensationalism and scaremongering in the media. There's a couple of examples here from the Mail Online back in 2011. It was called "The Scourge of the Suburbs, feared by homeowners, can grow 4 feet in a day," apparently. And as its tendrils, I presume they mean rhizomes, spread horizontally underground, they can bring down walls, erode foundations, and break up paving drains and driveways. Massive exaggeration there to anybody who knows anything about knotweed, as well as deliberate use of language like scourge, feared, tendrils, to make people scared of it. More recently, 2019, you've got the Express. Says it's been known to decimate values of properties. Decimate, again, very emotive word. Very, very invasive plant. Nothing will kill it at the moment. It comes through concrete. It grows through anything. No, it doesn't. Now, by contrast, bamboos are actively promoted by public media figures, gardening publications, nurseries, garden centres. And so Alan Titchmarsh, who I think is personally responsible for a lot of the popularity of bamboo over the past sort of 30 years. And here in 2021, he is still recommending bamboo. You could choose a contemporary area with plenty of dramatic architectural plants like bamboo. And then we've got the Gardening Express website. So this is nice and current. It's up online. Bamboo plants, extremely fashionable. And they say we're offering varieties that are easy to grow, fully hardy. These varieties don't get too large for the average garden, are equally suitable for growing in containers as well as in open ground. Well, a lot of the species that they've got listed on their website, I personally know to be highly invasive. So this is where we've got the problem. So I thought I'd do this little comparison list. These are the problems associated with knotweed and the problems associated with bamboo. And now we can play a little game of spot the difference. And the eagle-eyed members of the audience will have spotted that really the one that jumps out is property sales, because knotweed is really impacting on that. It has to be declared under the TA6 form in sort of in England and Wales, I think. And so you've got sort of a lot of this awareness, and you've got mortgage lenders are asking questions about knotweed. They're not asking those questions about bamboo. So really the issue that you've got with bamboo that you don't necessarily have with knotweed is the shading of neighboring property, because knotweed normally grows to about 3.5 meters tall. Bamboo can grow to like 6 to 8 meters tall. But everything else is the same. You've got loss of amenity use, you've got the domination of other vegetation, you've got neighbor disputes, you've got structural damage to a certain extent, which we'll go through in a minute. You've got loss of biodiversity through escape into the wild. So let's have a look at some of the things that bamboo can do. Impacts on the built environment. So they say a picture tells 1,000 words. So I think those pictures probably do. Bamboo rhizomes, they are strong. They're pointed. They can push through a variety of materials. If they've got sort of quite loose soil, they can really run through those. And bamboo, obviously, just to sort of like clarify again from what we were saying right at the beginning, this is running bamboo we're talking about. So running bamboo, it typically spreads beneath paving, tarmac, other hard surfaces. It can lift or crack them. You can see in the bottom left there, you've got the bamboo coming up through tarmac, so they're breaking up the edge of tarmac. The bottom right there, you can see it all underneath paving slabs, and you can also see the one at the top left there. And before you lift up the paving slabs, the top right there is kind of what you're looking at, where it's just coming up around the sides of the paving slabs, and you can see it's lifted that entire paving slab above the ground. This is where it gets scary. This is a rarity, but the fact that I've got photographs of it demonstrates that it definitely happens. Rhizomes, just like knotweed rhizomes, bamboo rhizomes will exploit weaknesses in structures. And if it finds a pathway or a weakness, it will exploit those. It will find its way into buildings. Now, Japanese knotweed, if it finds its way into a building, it will come up at its earliest possible opportunity. And so you will normally find it coming up by the skirting, or if there's a sort of a loose floorboard, very, very close to the exterior wall. Knotweed won't head too far into a building unless there are very, very specific circumstances that enable it to do so. Rhizome of bamboo doesn't do that. Rhizome of bamboo will search. And if it finds its way into a building, it'll keep going. And it'll keep going. It'll keep looking for chinks of light, and then it will send shoots up. And then you get things like these pictures. Neighbor disputes. So many neighbor disputes with bamboo. So you've got these running rhizomes, because they're capable of traveling quite significant distances, certainly much further than knotweed rhizomes are capable of spreading. You get the potential for domination of lawns and shrub beds. You can get the kind of damage you can see in the right-hand picture there, where a rhizome came over from the next door property, got down between the render and the wall, headed down to the ground, and then started running along the ground behind the render, sending shoots up, pushing the render off the wall. You can also see there's a little bit coming out through the tarmac to the left-hand side of the wall there as well. And so it's not surprising that if you're living in a house and suddenly you get this because your neighbor's planted bamboo, there's going to be a dispute. And where you have a problem is if people get very defensive, because at the moment, bamboo is still a very, very popular plant, and people who plant it love it. And they do get very defensive, and they don't want to think that it's causing a problem, or if they admit that it is causing a problem, they want to somehow find this magic solution whereby they can keep their bamboo, even though it is proven to be sort of highly invasive, without having to sort of like remove it. And it's a little bit like trying to shut the lid of Pandora's box, really. After bamboo starts running everywhere, if you start just trying to contain it, it's just going to really push against whatever those defensive barriers are, and it will just continue spreading, and it might spread in an opposite direction and go and bother somebody else, but it will keep spreading. So it's not uncommon for bamboo owners to go into denial, be highly resistant, facing up to their responsibilities, and this can make neighbour disputes very difficult to resolve. If the thing goes legal, obviously the only winners in legal cases are solicitors, because they're the one that get all the fees. Everybody else has to pay all the money. So I'm just going to show you this example, which is very fresh on my mind because I was at this site last week. So if you concentrate on the left-hand photograph, you can see the bamboo there. You can see the size of it. It's been there for the best part of 20 years. The owner of that bamboo did not want that bamboo to go. And the bamboo had spread into 3 neighboring properties. And there was negotiations for the best part of a year and a half before the owner of the bamboo accepted that they needed to do something about their bamboo. Now, if I draw your attention to the left-hand side of the left-hand picture, you can see a large wooden shed there. So the right-hand picture is what we found after the shed had been removed. So this gives you some idea just how much rhizome was under that shed. So I would say that bamboo needs to be taken much more seriously by property buyers, building surveyors, and mortgage lenders. Now, as I've sort of said right at the beginning, there are different types. You've got the clumpers and the runners, and the clumpers are less problematic. So not all bamboos are problematic. Clumping bamboo is generally easier to contain. As I say, they will still, you give them room, they will spread over time, but much more slowly and in a more controllable manner. And some of the more common genera of clumping bamboo would be like Bambusa fargesia, we see sort of quite a lot. But the running bamboos, that's where the problem is, because it sounds obvious, but it's in the nature of running bamboos to spread. If you look at that right-hand picture, you can see where the rhizomes are. So you've got that bamboo hedge in the background there, which has been planted next door. And then in this garden, they've effectively lost the use of their lawn because they've just got bamboo growing out of their lawn. And as an extra little quirk, what often happens with bamboo is if it starts running, but then you kind of keep cutting it back, so you can see that they've maintained that at a height of probably about 1.5 to 2 meters. That can actually encourage the rhizomes to spread further afield to get away from the sort of the control measures. And so this is probably what has happened here. Now, the more common running bamboos are Philostachys, Pseudosarsa, and Sarsa. These are the ones that we see most of the time. Pseudosarsa and Sarsa are the ones that I've seen most commonly escaping into the wild. And Philostachys and Pseudosarsa are the ones that I've seen more commonly in people's gardens. In fact, pretty much every single site that I go to, I have got at least a 90% chance that it's going to be a Philostachys or a Pseudosarsa bamboo. And that is an issue which we will come to shortly. So people tend to plant a bamboo because they feel it's exotic, or they just like the look of it. They're attracted to bamboo because of the speed with which it can provide a screen. And not everyone who plants a bamboo in their garden will research whether the species they've chosen will become problematic. Now, the people that do research often are relying on the advice from the people who are selling them. And consequently, they're not always getting the right advice. And we've come across a lot of clients who have bought bamboo in good faith, or bought a bamboo in good faith, believing it to be non-problematic, only to find that that isn't the case. So to give you an example, let's talk about Philostachys bamboos. These are, I would say, in my experience, the most common genus of bamboo planted in people's gardens in Britain. There's lots of different species of Philostachys. There's the golden bamboos, the green bamboos, and the black bamboos. They tend to be like the really popular ones. The golden bamboos and the black bamboos, particularly popular. But we have seen quite a lot of like the Philostachys bessettii, the green ones. But if you go to different sources, they can be described as clumping or strolling, whatever that means, or vigorous and requiring containment. So it's no wonder that people are confused whether they're a problem or not. And a lot of people plant them genuinely believing them to be non-invasive. But the things that happens with Philostachys bamboos that people are not usually told about by the people selling them is they start off with the clumping habit, which is probably why they're being sold as clumping bamboos. But unlike most other bamboos, they will change their growing habit if the conditions are right. And when those conditions are right is anybody's guess. I've seen it happen as early as 18 months after planting. I've seen it happen as late as 20 years after planting. And in some case, that whatever it is that triggers that change may never happen. The conditions might not be right for it, and that Philostachys bamboo may remain as a clumping bamboo. But once they develop a running habit, they're capable of extending their rhizomes by between 1 to 4 meters per season, depending on the conditions. The picture on the right there is of one of the golden Philostachys bamboos. That one's actually Philostachys aureosulcata spectrabilis. You can see on the left-hand side there, you can see how it's all in a little bit of a clump. But you can see as it goes gradually further towards the center of the picture, there's sort of like those that clump's getting a little bit wider. It's more linear rather than in a round clump. And to the right-hand side of the picture, you can see just catching the sunlight there, a couple of new shoots that are coming up from sort of running rhizomes. So it starts off with a clump and then it runs and sort of like spreads everywhere. Now, it's very, very common to hear people talk about black bamboo, Philostachys nigra, as not being that much of a problem. That it's promoted as being as clumping, or it's yes, it runs, but it doesn't run as much as the others. It's less of an issue. So I just offer this as a counter, really. I mean, yes, this is an extreme case, but you can see in the left-hand picture there, big clump of Philostachys nigra. It's been allowed to sort of establish itself over sort of like, probably 1 to 2 decades. And then 12 meters away, what's this popping up through the tarmac? You've got that's the extent of those rhizomes coming from there. If you look at all of the dark areas, that's where the rhizome is coming up through that tarmac. The rhizomes were also spreading into the lawn behind the trampoline. If you look to the left-hand side of the picture, you can see a lot of green at the base of the wooden fence. That's bamboo. In the soil area to the front of the fence there, to the left-hand side of the tarmac, that was full of bamboo rhizomes, and of course it had spread into next door. So Philostachys nigra, given the right conditions, can be just as bad as the others. So let's have a look at a Philostachys case study. So what we have here, if I take you through from left to right. So on the left-hand side there, you can see that there is a raised terrace. So you've got the level of the ground floor level of the house is about 1 meter higher than the level of the garden. And so bridging that gap, you've got this terrace, which is about 4 meters by 4.5 meters, 1 meter tall, with set steps, which then takes you down to the garden. And if you look on that left-hand picture, you can see the cream fence there. It's just to the left of center of the picture. So if you go to the middle picture, there's the cream fence there again. And you can see that there are 2 bamboos that have been planted there. The one on the right, the one that's kind of a little bit more yellow, is one of the golden bamboos. The one on the left, which seems a little bit shrubbier, is one of the green bamboos, Philostachys bessettii. So both of those bamboos are Philostachys. As it happened, the golden one didn't cause too much of an issue because the people next door sort of cut that down, but it didn't need to because the Philostachys bessettii was causing enough trouble of its own. So the bamboo rhizomes had come through under the fence. Had gone through the full width of that terrace, and on the right-hand picture, you can see where it was emerging at the other side of the terrace. So if you kind of look up to the top of the picture, again, you can see the cream fence, so that can orientate you which way around you're looking. So this is what we were seeing in the terrace. So we thought probably there would be only a few surface rhizomes. So we took up some paving slabs, and this is what we found underneath. But we also found that some of it was going down deeper. If you look to the left-hand side of that bottom picture, you can see a rhizome sort of right at the top of the soil area there that is heading down. So we were pretty sure that that was heading down to the stuff that was coming out the side of the terrace. But it was pretty clear that in order to get the rhizome out of here, we had to effectively take the terrace apart. So the owner had decided that they were going to have a brand new terrace built. So in order to do that, the old one was demolished. This is how much rhizome we got out of it. So and this had all come from one bamboo. And it had gone in and it effectively filled that terrace, gone up and back and round and tried to come out in different places, headed down under bits of concrete in the foundation. And that was, that was quite an eye opener to find just how much rhizome we had in such a small space. This is what Philistachys bamboo is capable of. So then we have the Pseudosarsa bamboos, which I would say is probably the second most popular type of bamboo planted in residential gardens. Again, people think it's a clumping bamboo, and it is, but it isn't, because it forms dense clumps, as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side there. But it then forms running rhizomes, which comes from the clumps, and then starts forming other clumps further down that rhizome. And so you end up getting a series of dense clumps that are all linked by rhizome, and it can spread over sort of quite a wide area. And so Pseudosarsa case study. This started off, there was an original clump that was planted on a bank, and it had spread to dominate the entire bank. It was covering around 40 square meters by the time I got to see it. It began to encroach into an adjacent property. And so it's not quite clear just how all of this lot links together, but these next pictures will make it a little clearer. So the left-hand picture, you can see all of the space in the bare soil that's between all of these various clumps that are forming. But you can really see it after we, during part of the treatment program, we cut all of the columns down. And so you can see all of those different clumps that are all just taking over this whole bank. And it's not just that face of the bank. If you go kind of round sort of by the side of that building over on the right hand side, so you go around sort of like by right angles, it had all gone that way as well. And it was lots of clumps all interlinked. And people plant this in postage stamp sized gardens in terraced townhouses. So what should surveyors be looking for when inspecting a property? I say surveyors, actually, I'm going to open this out completely. Not just sort of in people who are working in invasive weeds. I would say proper building surveyors, mortgage lenders should really be looking for these kind of things. You've got people buying properties should be looking for these kind of things. If there's a bamboo there, first question, has it been planted right up against the boundary with no visible signs of containment? Because if it has, that's already a red flag. Because if it is an invasive bamboo, if it's a running bamboo, if it's right up against the fence, it's going to run straight under the fence. And if you then try and put some sort of containment measures in, there's no space between the bamboo and the fence. So the only way you'd actually be able to put some containment measures in is to get rid of the bamboo anyway, because you're going to have to dig half of it up in order to put the containment in. Second question, is there bamboo next door, which is planted right up against the boundary, in which case it's the same thing, but you're on the other side. Can you identify if the bamboo is a Philostachys or a Pseudostarsa? Because if so, chances are that's going to be problematic at some point in the future. Is the bamboo clumping, or has it begun to run? Now, there's an easy way of spotting that. These pictures were both taken on the same site, and so there were a series of black bamboo, Philostachys nigra. You can see the picture to the left. That bamboo is still clumping. That hasn't been triggered. That hasn't started producing running rhizomes yet. And you can tell because all of the culms are very, very close together. They're all sort of like packed in, reasonably round. It's not become linear. It's quite compact. So that's clumping. But a couple of bamboos down the fence, we had this one. This one has been triggered. It is starting to run. Now, why this one started to run and the others on site hadn't yet is a bit of a mystery, but that happens. And so you can see the arrows are all pointing to culms that have come up a distance away from the main clump. And that's how you know that that bamboo is running. Which brings us to the question, is bamboo as bad as knotweed? Well, bamboo is capable of most of the same issues as Japanese knotweed when it comes to the natural and built environments. And although it's found at a much shallower depth, so you don't really need to worry about digging sort of like 1, 2, 3 meters to get bamboo out. It'd be very, very rare for you to dig more than a meter, and usually it'd be less than half a meter. So it's a much shallower depth, but the rhizomes are stronger and they can spread much further and faster than knotweed rhizomes. So the two kind of counter each other. And if knotweed finds a pathway into a house, as I've said before, it will seek to send up shoots as close to the outside as possible. But if bamboo finds a pathway into a house, it will keep searching far within the footprint of the house. And it's capable of invading the entire ground floor if left unchecked. And I have actually seen that. Which brings us to some questions. Should legislation be tighter around the disposal of bamboo? Because it's just like knotweed, it's capable of regenerating from rhizome fragments. Should restrictions be introduced to limit the sale and planting of the more invasive bamboos? Should bamboo be identified in residential building surveys? Should mortgage lenders be more concerned about the presence of the more problematic bamboos on or adjacent to properties they're providing lending for, in much the same way that they are concerned about the presence of knotweed on or adjacent to properties they're lending for? Should the general public, as well as building surveyors, be made more aware of the issues some bamboos could cause? Well, these are open questions, and it's entirely subjective, I guess. Some of you will have different answers to others. If you ask me those questions, I would say the answers to all of them should be yes. But that's my opinion, and you may hold a different opinion. By all means, put something in the chat. We'll talk about it afterwards. So that kind of brings us to the end. So I'm just going to put in a quick plug. If you want to know a little bit more about invasive bamboos, there is a book that I had a part in writing. It can be ordered, or it can be ordered from bookshops, or it can be ordered directly from Liverpool University Press. There's a link there. There's a QR code there. There's also a bamboo course, which the PCA runs, which they've conned me into running for them. And that's running in February. So if you want to know a little bit more, like how to identify different kinds of bamboo and things like that, then sign up to that. And that brings me to the end. So I hope you enjoyed that and got something from that. But I'm going to hand back to Andy now.
Oh, thank you, Jim, and many thanks for kind of sharing your insights and knowledge there. Have to say, Alan Titchmarsh, who knew he was partially to blame for our bamboo neighbourhood wars? I had no idea
And
Alan was a
anybody
big.
who watched Ground Force, Andy, would know that, because it got to a certain point on Ground Force, he was planting bamboo screens everywhere.
Was he right?
I'd love
Okay.
to see what's happened to those properties in the intervening time.
Oh, like a little recap. I've never actually personally watched Ground Force myself, so I'll have to kind of take your word just for that one. But folks, just to kind of let you know that if you do have a question or that you want to post to Jim, just with regards to anything he's had to say, do feel free just to kind of stick it into the chat. Now, we don't have a lot of questions this at the moment, so most likely we will be able to pose your question to Jim. Jim, I do have a question for you though before we do go into questions, because we kind of touched on the kind of is bamboo as bad as knotweed and the kind of differences and etc. If it was your house and it was your garden, would you be more concerned with knotweed or bamboo?
Bamboo.
Bamboo. Interesting.
It depends on the knotweed. You know, if I've got a house and the entire garden next door was knotweed, then obviously I'd be a bit concerned about that. But if there's a little bit of knotweed down the bottom of the garden, if I've got the choice between that and somebody's planted a bamboo hedge, I'll take the knotweed. It's going to be a lot easier to contain. There's a lot of questions that I'm that are catching my eye in the chat actually. It's like Graham, you've said about is a homeowner allowed to cut rhizomes of canes from bamboo grown in their garden from their neighbour? Yes, you can, but where you cut it, it will regenerate some new growth. So where you cut it, you'll get a shoot coming up. So you really, it needs to be dealt with from the source. Otherwise, you're going to be doing that all the time. Because it'll keep trying to come back in. There's an interesting one just scrolling down there. You know, Marcus Brown came up with a theory as to why that black bamboo, some of it was running and some of it wasn't, was about competition from other plants growing close by, which is very, very possible because the one that was running was right next to a fig tree. So yes, you may be right there, Marcus. That might be the case. That might be why that one's been triggered earlier than the others. Sorry,
Jim, sorry, just to come in because with just before we kind of hit the questions that come in the chat, there has been some questions that came in via email both before the webinar and beforehand. So I'm actually going to go firstly proper route one with you. Who came? This is a question by email from Alistair Hutton. Why don't they just simply ban the selling of running bamboo? I mean, what is that?
I don't know. I mean, it would make sense. I mean, the only thing that I can say about that is let's take knotweed as an example. Knotweed was introduced in the mid 1800s. Warnings started to be issued about it in the early 1900s. Legislation was passed in 1981. These things don't happen quickly. So I would love to see particularly Philostachys and Pseudosarsa finding their way onto Schedule 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. That would help a lot. But that's going to be a long road. But if it helps, I have already started having some conversations with the non-native species secretariat to that end. But I don't hold your breath.
Do you know, Melanie Draper's actually, just a kind of follow-on question from there. Melanie Draper's actually asking, Jim, have you ever engaged with the RICS with regards to kind of the rest of the property for bamboo? And I suppose that nicely also joins on to a question that came from Jane Warwick, which says, do you believe surveyors should have a duty of care to report bamboo in a property when it's being surveyed?
Some surveyors are picking up on bamboo now, and I think that can only be a good thing because we've seen I personally have seen too many people who have bought a property not knowing that it's got a huge problem sitting there in the garden or sitting next door in the form of invasive bamboo, and they bought the house, and then suddenly they've inherited this problem that they've got to deal with. And I'm sure they would have loved their surveyor to have flagged it up, so they at least could have been a little bit more informed about it. So yes, it would be great if we've got more building surveyors actually being aware of bamboo issues. I mean, the difficulty, though, is understanding the difference between the problematic and the non-problematic bamboo, because you can't just ban all bamboo, because there are a number of bamboos that you can stick in a container. They get probably about 1.5 meters tall. They look very nice. They never cause a problem. So we need to make sure that it's not a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, bamboo is bad. But there are some bamboos that are bad, and unfortunately, it's the bad ones that keep getting planted in people's gardens, which is mainly the Philostachys and the Pseudosarsa. They are the two most problematic ones that I've encountered in people's gardens. And as I say, when I go to a property, I've got at least a 90% chance that I'm going to be looking at some Pseudosarsa or Philostachys, or both, because people often plant more than one species in their garden. So it would be, I think awareness is a good thing. And there's always the course in February. So sign up to that, and you'll get to a little bit more information about it and help you identify stuff, which will also answer the question that I saw whizzing by on the chat about herbicides and how to deal with it and all the rest of it, because it's all on the course.
Before you go into that, because you are bang on, right? I mean, probably the number one thing that people were actually coming from, and there's so many people with questions that I've had via email as well as on the chat as well. I can't say all your names, I apologize. But when it does come to controlling and treating and removing it, from your experience, what are the typical ways you have to do it? Is it just a case that it's typically chemical treatment, or do you have to really just go in there with your hands and dig that stuff out?
It is pretty much the same as Japanese knotweed. You can treat it or you can dig it up. They're the sort of two extremes, and there are some variations between the two, but that's effectively what you're looking at. You try and contain it with root barriers, but bamboo is very, very good at escaping containment, particularly the Philostachys bamboos. So you've got to make sure you really are doing it properly, and probably still need to monitor it. Yeah, I mean, it's so you can treat it. Herbicide treatment does work. It does take several years, same as knotweed. You got to kind of make sure you're doing it at the right time, or you can dig it up. Digging it up, if you can't get a mechanical digger into that garden, it's going to be an absolute pig of a job, because the bamboo rhizome, it's thick, it's woody, and it forms really sort of like dense clumps underneath the main part of the bamboo, and trying to dig that out by hand is very, very, very difficult, very labor intensive. And if it's actually in a really enclosed space, like if it's in a raised like brick planter or something like that, then, and it's been allowed to sort of really established and it's been running everywhere, then the rhizomes are so densely packed, it's almost like trying to dig out reinforced concrete. So it's not an easy job. Digging it out, a lot of people just immediately go, can I dig it out? And then you say, well, that's going to cost you a few £1,000s. And they go, oh, right. So tell me about this treatment option. So it's the same with knotweed. There's not necessarily one size fits all solution. It's what is the solution that is most appropriate for the type of bamboo and the location of the bamboo. And the nature of the client. I do actually just want to jump into something that I've seen on the chat, because I think this is really important sharing with everybody. And thank you very much, Paul. Paul Beckett has put up about, he says, with regard to bamboo being included on the TA6 form, the Law Society recently told me that they would consider including it in future editions only if it is included as a risk in future editions of the UK Finance Handbook. And Paul, bless him, has been in discussions about this with UK Finance. So You never know.
Well done,
That
Paul.
might change
Yeah.
things drastically if it ends up on the TA6.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you spotted that, Jim, because I was literally going to draw your attention to Paul's post that was in there. Can I just touch on, because there has been, I have had 1, 2, 3 emails in terms of with regards to containment, and also there's been quite a few in the chat. When it comes to containment, now you mentioned briefly there that sometimes containment can be difficult, but for a homeowner, let's take it for a homeowner, someone like myself that doesn't necessarily have the wealth of knowledge of bamboo that you have. I mean, what would you suggest as forms of containment that you would feel confident, or at least semi-confident, that it would actually contain it?
First thing, choose the right species. Choose a species that is absolutely 100% clumping, because then you're not going to have too many issues in terms of containment. If you're going to put bamboo in a pot, then again, it's even clumping. Actually, if it allows, it has the opportunity to sort of like develop, and it really produces sort of like quite a dense mass of rhizomes. Ceramic pots, it can actually crack them, can sort of break them open. If you've got running rhizomes, and you plant or you put the soil too close to the top of the container, the rhizomes can actually just come over the top. And the thing that a lot of people forget about is the drainage hole. So they put it in a container and then they stick it on a soft landscape, and the bamboo just goes straight through the hole in the bottom and straight into the ground. And then sort of start spreading. You can put in root barriers, but the root barriers, again, you need to think about with running rhizomes, you need to make sure that the rhizome can't go over the top, because a lot of these running rhizomes are very, very close to the surface. In fact, quite often you can see them skimming the surface. So you need to make sure that the barrier is built up so it can't go over the top. You also need to think about how far the rhizomes are going to spread. I mean, with knotweed, you tend to be sort of like, you go, oh well, if we have the rhizome, if we have the sort of the barrier going, so like something like 3, 5, maybe 7 meters beyond the visible knotweed, the knotweed's never really going to get there. It's going to be fine. But you can't really do that with bamboo, because with some species of bamboo, particularly the Philostachys bamboo, it can find its way across an entire garden in one season, given the right circumstances. So yes, you really need to sort of think it through. But I would say that the golden rule is choose the right species in the first place. Okay. Don't plant a Philostachys. Don't plant a Pseudosarsa.
Yeah, just before I hit my next question, Francis Connolly, you've put on a comment saying, can you go back to the last slide for details, please? Can you just let us know just what slide you were potentially referring to? If that was the book, what I can do is I can certainly share a link into the chat. My next questions come from Sam Richards. It's more about identification. He's asking, are there any easily identifiable ways to identify the type of rhizome without having to dig it out and inspect the rhizomes?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to that picture that I showed of the 2 black bamboos. It's down to, is it clumping, is it running? And if all of the culms are sort of like quite close together and they're just, you know, in a bit of a sort of a round shape, and everything's sort of quite tightly packed, that's clumping. As soon as you start seeing shoots coming up any distance away from that central clump, that's running. Even if, because to start off with, it might only be like about that far away, but then the next one will be that far away, and then it will, you know, it'll keep going and keep going. So that's really when you've got an indication that your bamboo is running, if it's not really sort of tightly packed together. Got
you. Next question comes from John Dixon. Now, I think in part you probably already answered this during the questions and other bits, but I also, Paul has helped with this as well, but he's asking, why aren't mortgage lenders and surveyors more concerned about bamboo? Well, I think in part they are going to become more concerned about bamboo, but in your opinion, what are your thoughts to
it? I think most of them just don't know. They haven't cottoned onto it yet. And see, the thing is, bamboo is still very much a darling plant. You know, you go online, you go on a lot of the top gardening magazines and things like this, TV programs, gardening programs, people are still planting bamboo. People are still recommending bamboo. So at the moment, bamboo is very much protected by its reputation. It's a lot of people think it's wonderful. And this is why it's getting planted in so many gardens. You've got sort of a lot of sources are recommending it. And people who plant it in the garden, they love the way it moves in the wind, and it produces a nice big screen, and it's fantastic. And it's only later that they start discovering that it's a problem. And quite often, we will see people will plant all of this bamboo and then sell the property and bugger off and let somebody else inherit the problem. So it hasn't really got onto mortgage lenders' radar yet. It's only people who have had a detrimental experience of bamboo who are kind of going, no, actually, this stuff is horrible, and we need to do something about it. But there are an increasing number of legal cases. I mean, Paul Beckett has put another sort of message up there and said he's worked on a number of legal cases with bamboo, and we've had the same experience. So it is going down that route. But I think mortgage lenders will wake up to it eventually. But at the moment, that they're not really picking. I mean, it might be that in the current climate, because of course the economy crashing around our ears right now, I think we're finding a lot more of mortgage lender resistance to lending. So just as we had back in 2008, 2009, where knotweed became a focus for why they wouldn't lend, it's possible they might start waking up to bamboo and going, actually, we've got a problem with this. I hope it doesn't go down that route, because then that'll end up being knee jerk, and then it will probably any bamboo, or we're not lending on it, despite the fact that there's only some bamboos that cause problems. But they may use just economic climate as if they're looking around for reasons why they can refuse lending, then they might spot it. But I think it's going to take time before really it gets properly on mortgage lenders' radar. And I think it's more likely to get on their radar the more building surveyors start picking up on it.
Well, if memory serves me, that was a similar case of knotweed as well. It took a bit of time, then all of a sudden it went like the clappers, and eventually started getting on other people's radars. But I'm conscious of time here. I've got a question which kind of semi-relates to just knotweed and bamboo. It came from Sarah Jones. This came via email. Sarah is a chartered surveyor, just to kind of give you a bit of context and background. But she's asking that when individuals are treating or removing bamboo, is it similar to knotweed, with the risk of regrowth with potential small pieces of the plant being accidentally left behind? I think what she's been meaning is the dormancy that sometimes knotweed refers to. Yeah,
it can definitely, if you dig out bamboo and you don't dig it out properly, and you leave bits in the ground, you will get bamboo regrowth. That's almost definite. In terms of dormancy, bamboo can go dormant, but I personally haven't seen evidence of it doing that for more than 18 months so far. If I see something that tells me otherwise, then fair enough. But at the moment, the dormancy seems to be pretty short. Seems to be like about a season and a half at most. So provided that's kind of like built into the treatment program or post-treatment or monitoring or whatever, then that shouldn't really be an issue. We've certainly had experience of a number of, because we've been doing bamboo for quite a few years, and we've got to the ends of numbers of programs and we haven't sort of seen anything sort of come back. But digging it out is the problem, because quite often people will just get their local gardening firm in, and what they will do is they will dig out the main clump of the plant, and then they'll miss all the running rhizomes. And then next thing you know, instead of having like one sort of clump of bamboo, they've got lots and lots of bits of bamboo popping up all over the place. And then it's harder to dig that out, because then you're trying to find where all of the fragmented bits are. So that is an issue. I've got to respond to Annie Tollerfield.
Oh, I'm saving that one to the end.
She's just said, "Have you spoken to Alan Titchmarsh?" No, I haven't. But I kind of refer to the my friend Rob Mitchell said that he thinks actually we shouldn't be demonizing Alan Titchmarsh. We should be sending him Christmas cards every year to thank him for all of his poor advice, which has given us work. So, it's a point of view.
Oh, right, okay. We'll maybe not explore that. But yeah, I was actually saving Annie to the end there. But I've got just 3 more questions I'm going to hit you with. If you can, just maybe be quick or fairly short with the answers, just because we're running out of time. Stuart Duffy is asking, this refers back to containment. Is there a minimum depth if you are trying to contain bamboo? I mean, what should you be digging down to?
Half a meter is sort of like your minimum depth, because it's very, very rare to find bamboo rhizomes below 30 centimeters. Having said that, if the bamboo is not looking terribly healthy, you might find deeper rhizomes, because if it's not getting the nutrition it needs from where it is growing up, it will search and can go up to a meter deep, sort of with the rhizomes searching for more moisture. So it is capable of that, but I would say, your minimum depth is half a meter.
Cool. Well, I'm just going to finish off with 2 questions just from Craig Hutchison. First one, just very much your opinion here. Herbicide application on mature growth before physical removal, or better to treat small regrowths after dig? What is your opinion?
It does depend on the circumstances. I mean, if you're able to go straight in and dig out, then go straight in and dig out. But if you're not in a position to dig out straight away, then I would definitely get started on the treatment just to weaken the bamboo, stop it spreading any further. Depends on the time of year as well, because in the first half of the year is when bamboo is growing up. Second half of the year is when bamboo is growing out. That's the typical cycle. Obviously, if you start sort of messing about with it, it can sort of change that cycle. So if it's in the process of growing up, then that could be sort of like a good time just to dig the thing out. If it's in the process of growing out, you want to like make sure that if you've got a little bit of a delay before you can actually get in with your digger, then doing a treatment just to try and weaken it and stop it spreading any further is not a bad idea. So yeah, it depends on the circumstance really. As there are particular situations where each view would be valid.
All right. Well, last question. Again from Craig. Again, your opinion here. If an owner buys a property with bamboo at the boundary coming up public pavements, where are the liabilities here? Who's responsible?
Well, whoever's bamboo it is their responsibility. If they are damaging public highway, then the local highways will, if they notice it, if it's brought to their attention, will actually say, right, you need to do something about this, because they're not going to want their pavement being damaged. And similarly, if it's growing into an adjoining garden, then it's your responsibility to make sure that it doesn't cause a nuisance to other people. So ultimately, responsibility is always down to whoever planted the bamboo in the first place, or who has inherited the property where the bamboo was planted, unfortunately. And there's a lot of situations with that. I think I've seen more situations where we've had to deal with bamboo that somebody inherited rather than the bamboo that somebody planted.
Interesting. And Francis, just to kind of, I see you've got back to us as well. I know you said the last slide. I think the last slide was the book. What I'll do is I'll ping you a link to that book just after this webinar, just to your email address. Well, guys, for anyone that is looking for additional information, any kind of guidance and stuff like that, there is a variety of information sources you can go to on the PCA website. you can visit our professional help and guidance section. The link is up there. There's lots of information, assistance, and professional knowledge that's been shared there. There is as well our invasive weed technical document library where you'll be able to find sources of information. The CPD video library as well. There is other CPD videos that do talk about bamboo. Funny enough, that has our gym in it, actually talking about that. And of course, there will be the replay to this webinar that's going to be coming out to all. Now, I've just shared the links to everything just within the chat there. That will also be in the show notes for anyone that wants to watch the replay. You heard Jim mention it over the course. If you are a professional and you are very keen to learn a little bit more, there is an online course which actually Jim teaches on bamboos and other invasive grasses. It is ideal for surveyors that really just want to develop their knowledge and insights and identification. There is other courses available as well. You can see them up there on the screen. The invasive plant identification training is particularly good as well. But again, anyone that is interested, I've just stuck links into the chat there, and it will be also in the show notes. Just before we go and finish off, I just want to do a quick nod to the the International Invasive Weed Conference that is in 2 weeks' time. If you are keen to get up to speed with the challenges, developments, and emerging issues that are facing many professionals within the invasive weed sector, as well as within property professionals and construction the professionals can't seem to talk. I would encourage you to check out the 2023 International Invasive Weed Conference. It is on the 16th of November. For those that have been before, or for those that have been to any of our conferences, you know this is a great day, filled with CPD, filled with valuable learning. There's a great program, an established lineup of renowned speakers. Simply check it out. And again, I have stuck the link to the conference just within the chat, and again I will put that into the show notes. Just before we sign off, I haven't updated this slide, but our next webinar is now up on the website. This time we are switching our focus to waterproofing and VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Title of the webinar is Hydrocarbons and Waterproofing Design, Important Considerations. That will be on the 30th of November. It will be our last webinar for the year. Again, I've just stuck the link into the chat. If you are interested, just simply follow the link and sign up there. And again, it will be on the show notes at the end. Well, last and not least, Jim, I just firstly want to say a big thank you to yourself for, again, sharing your knowledge to all. I think, in speaking on behalf of everyone, I think it was a great presentation. It certainly gave me a lot of insights. And again, thank you for sharing. For those that joined us this morning, a big thank you for joining us this morning. And lastly, and hopefully you have a lovely rest of the morning. Goodbye, everyone, and hopefully we see you on the next webinar. Take care.